Hi boys and girls, Mrs. Sadowski back to you again. This time we're at the historic Santa Barbara Mission. So we've come up the hill from where the Presidio is, because the Presidio was meant to help protect from invasion, and invasion would have come from the sea. So we're up the hill, safe distance, and behind me is the mission. So we're gonna walk up the hill a little bit, and the Mission Church is the most dynamic of the features here. You've got the twin bell towers, and the church was very, very special. And it was kept even after the Spanish missions turned over to Mexico. The people still loved their church and kept their church beautiful. Now, as we walk up, there is this area right here. This was called the Lavanderia. Lavanderia may sound very similar to you, as in laundry. Well, the lavanderia is where they would have done their laundry. So as I walk up here, and I'll get you as close as I can. So you can see it's a long trough, and it would have been full of water. So if you could picture a lot of Chumash women out here, the bear head that you see there, that would have spit water out. They built an aqueduct system to help channel water from the top of the hills here in Santa Barbara down to where they needed the water at the mission. So the water would have poured out of that bear's mouth into this trough, filled it with water, and the Chumash women would have been out here washing the laundry. As we go a little farther up, we can see the mission fountain. So here's our mission fountain. It's very pretty. You can see it had some brick layers, and then they put some cement over it. Well, the water would have come down. Again, the aqueduct system would have brought all this down. Now, the Mission Museum is just up these stairs, and unfortunately, it is closed. Thank you, COVID-19. However, I can still go and enjoy the outdoor grounds, and so like I did with the Presidio, I'll share as much of it with you as I can, and I'll try not to trip and fall in the process. But if you come visit here, you come up to this area, and that's where your mission tour would begin. Out front, they have one of these bells. And so I want to make sure I get the bell. Okay. The bell is a symbol of El Camino Real, otherwise known as the Royal Highway or the King's Highway. And all these 21 missions in California were about a day's walking apart. So you could set out in the morning on one day and walk your way to the next. When I say walk, I really mean walk. Most people didn't have a horse unless you had some money. So you would have been walking from place to place along a dirt road. When you're driving along the freeway on the 101, you'll see a lot of these bells letting you know that you're on historic El Camino Real. They're also located along Highway 1 in California. So very similar to the Presidio, the mission would be in a rectangular shape, but the mission did have some windows with its doors, and the relationship between the Chumash people and the missionaries was actually a pretty positive one. Like I told some of you in our Zoom meetings, some of the interactions were not very peaceful between the Indians and the Spaniards. Some of them from Spain were kind of power hungry, really looking to take over, and they kind of treated the Indians living in the areas where they set up their missions a little bit more like slaves. Here it was more of a mutual working, trading of things at this mission, and that's why things were very peaceful. Unlike San Diego, where the Indians were known to revolt, and there were some major problems, including the burning down of the mission by the Indians, as well as killing one of the priests there. So here is the Mission Church, and you may not have realized its size, but I am backing up to it, and you can see the top of my head. The church is massive, and I wish I could take you inside, but I can't. You notice the big bell towers up there? The bells were very important. You see, they didn't have watches. They couldn't tell time that way. And so they would ring the bells. And according to the bells, it would let them know what time it was, because the people here at the mission needed to know when it was time to stop work, when it was time to pray, when it was time to get their meals. All of those kinds of things revolved around the mission bells, letting them know their schedule. So as you walk up, if you look at the top, there are some statues. Saint Barbara, who the mission was named after. All of the churches, or all of the missions, were named after a saint, and usually that saint was chosen based on whose saint day it was around the founding of the mission. So in this case, Saint Barbara is the statue in the middle up there at the bottom, and then you have, I believe it's Faith, Hope, and Charity are the other statues that are up there. And like I said, I wish I could take you inside. It's beautiful. If you come back and visit this mission, when you're inside the chapel, they really liked things to look symmetrical. So there's one place in the chapel where it looks like there's windows on both sides, but really on one of the sides, the window is painted and made to look real. So something to look for if you come up here. The other thing that you should look for when you come up here would be in the cemetery. When we read Island of the Blue Dolphins, they talked about how the Indians were buried up here. The mission cemetery is just next to the church, beyond that wall back there. And there's a plaque near that wall, and it talks about Juana Maria, the lone woman of San Nicolas Island. Now, the mission, obviously, beautiful grounds. I'm going to walk to the top of these steps real fast because I want you to see the view. You see, the mission was set back and it kept it safe and protected. So I'm going to turn this camera around so you can see the view. Notice how far you can see now. It's a little bit foggy out there over the ocean, but if you look, you can see the boats, and down there, there is a pier. And down there is also the Presidio. So the missionaries could look out the windows from up here. They could look down and they could see if a ship was approaching. So they would know if the trading ships had come in. They would also know if there was an unfriendly ship nearby. Same thing with the Presidio, only the Presidio was closer to the shore, so they'd be right there ready to act. The missionaries, it would have been quite the hike down the hill and then quite the hike back up to bring up the supplies. Now, across from the mission, there's a beautiful, beautiful rose garden. So if you come up with your family, definitely bring a picnic. There's a place with roses and stuff, big grass area you could go. But the other cool part is across the street, you'll notice that stone wall. There's actually some old remains from some of the buildings and the workshops that were around the mission. And if you go farther up the road, you'll see the Santa Barbara Natural History Museum. So I am going to take you on a little tour of some of those ruins once I safely cross the street. I don't plan on getting hit by any cars today. That would not exactly be smart on my part. You'll notice in the making of this video, I have stayed far, far away from people, except for my own daughter. She drove me and is here with me walking one of our dogs. So here we go. Don't know if you can see behind me. Here's the outside of the Mission Church. And again, that wall is separating us from the Mission Cemetery, and then the cemetery leads into the church. Above the entrance to the doors of the church from the cemetery are some crossbones and skulls, again kind of marking that it's a place of death and burial. So we're going to cross the street here, and there's no cars coming. I'm in a crosswalk. So, oh, now there's a car coming, but I am safely in the crosswalk, if you don't believe me. See, here it is. Really and truly, I am being good, I promise. So here we go. We're going to go off-roading. Okay, so take a look. Just some natural green meadow area. And again, you can do this with your families. The mission, there it is. It's behind me. You can see Shay in the background too with the dog. She probably thinks I'm crazy for going off-roading, but it's really quite fun to come see the ruins, if I can still see the ruins. Let's see, which one shall I take you to first? I think I'll take you up to the old jailhouse. It's located up at the top of the hill, and then I'll circle back and take you by the tannery. The different workshops were really important. Some of them would have taken place right there at the mission, like maybe the blacksmith shop, anything for sewing, weaving, candle making too could have taken place excuse me, much closer to the mission. But the old jailhouse, that would have been separated. The tannery is where they actually took the cow hides and then they would do this process with them that involved putting the hide into this large vat, which is like a big pot, with some different chemicals and things to make the leather softer. And oh, there's the old jailhouse. I almost thought I didn't see it. As I go off-roading on my trail, I'm trying to talk to you, the camera, and make sure I'm not stepping on any unwanted wildlife. It'd be my luck to get bit by a snake or something out here, right? So I'm hiking up the trail and I'm approaching the old jailhouse. But like I was saying, the tannery would have been a smelly, smelly job. Because, well, you're dealing with dead animal skin. So, yeah, they didn't have that very close to the mission. So here we are, the jailhouse. Don't believe me? There's a sign. Jailhouse. So as I come up to it, it's not going to be a very big structure. Again, it would have been a very small area, not a lot of people. So we'll come inside. I just walked in the doorway. This is usually one of the students' favorite parts because we can come in here and we can, you know, look around. Now, obviously, this would have had a roof to it, and based on the way the different lines are, it looks like it probably would have been a a pointed roof, not a flat roof, because I can tell that two sides are kind of lower, two are a little bit raised. There's a hole at the back of it that makes me think maybe for running some water through from the aqueduct, perhaps. There's a hole up here, and then of course the doorway that I walked through. So I'm gonna come down out of it and I'm gonna walk. There's this big boulder that I'm walking on to go around it. And again, sorry, I'm not a professional videographer. This is all new to me. So here's a picture of, you know, the remains of that jailhouse from the street. And yes, I'm literally right next to a street here in Santa Barbara. This would have been the jailhouse. Now, if I turn around and you look across the street the other way, behind me, there is the pottery area. So there's an area over here, and I'll hold up the camera. So behind me over here, that would have been the pottery workshop. Again, away from the mission. Why? Because with pottery, you're gonna need some kilns. You're gonna have to cook it in fire. You don't wanna do that where things could be broken. There's also the mill across the way. Let me kind of angle the camera. Let's see. Not sure if you can see it, but it's out that way are the remnants of the old mill. And if you hike around in this area, sorry for the noise, but there are, like I said, there's a street here. Why? Because the town grew up around it. And we pave our streets now, and we have loud, noisy cars that drive around. Back in the day of the missions, though, you would have had horses, cattle, pigs, chickens, all brought here by the Spanish. And most of the people would have just walked around. You might have had some carts that you could load up with some things and have them pulled if you were taking them from one place to another. We're gonna take the trail now and head back towards that the tannery area that I was telling you about. But yeah, there would have been, you know, if you can picture, I'm gonna kind of turn for a moment, you know, picture the scenery. It's all very, very natural through this area, okay? So if you could picture your little roads are these little dirt trails, and you walk them to get from workshop to workshop. And, you know, as a Chumash living in this area, you would have had your Chumash village nearby with your op. And, you know, eventually you might have moved to where you lived at the mission. If you lived at the mission, you didn't live as family units. Instead, unmarried women lived in one area, unmarried men in another. Once you were married, then you could have your own little house to be together and raise your family and whatnot. But here in Santa Barbara, they didn't require you necessarily to live at the mission. Again, one of the reasons they didn't revolt against the Spanish missionaries. Other missions, no. The rule was once you were baptized, you had to stay at the mission and live at the mission. And if you ran away and tried to come back, or ran away and they found you, sometimes the priest would beat you. Not a very nice thing to do, hence the reason why they had some revolts. They thought that they were doing the work of God, and they thought it was their job to save the Indians, these savage people, from their ways of life. Again, it all depends on what perspective you're coming from and the way that you were raised and what your belief system is. The missionaries truly thought they were doing the work of God and the work of their country. The Indians had their own things. Fortunately, here in Santa Barbara, things were very peaceful, so that was good. So like I said, the tannery vats. So here's the little sign, and I'm gonna go off-roading to bring you a little bit closer to these tannery vats. You can see that there's two different sections of it. And this is where they would have taken that cowhide and tanned it, not laying it out in the sun, but tanning through the process using some chemicals and things, where they could then turn it into soft leather. You could then make clothing. You could do fabrics to cover furniture in. You could make boots. You could make nice belts. There were all kinds of uses for it, and it was very valuable. But more so, cattle hide. They used to skin the cows and lay out the cattle hides to dry. And when they do that, they were flat and kind of, I don't want to say crispy feel, but like a solid feel to them, almost like they were plastic or something, yet with kind of a soft cover. And if you tanned it, then it became soft like fabric or a blanket. And what they would do is they called them California banknotes. And you could, stack those up easily, carry them on a ship, and then they could take them to Europe and then, go through the tanning process to do what they wanted with. So there are multiple ways. They also got beef from the cattle as well, but nowadays the cows are more valuable for their beef. Back then they were more valuable for their hides. So here's that park that I was telling you about. You can see the beautiful rose garden. I will say that if you come here and you bring a ball, please do not throw the ball near the rose bushes. I came here once with a class and we were throwing a ball around and the kids were having a great time. They had lunch and we had done both our tours, and it was almost time for us to get ready to go back to school. And one of the little boys was running backwards to catch a ball, and he didn't realize how close to the rose bush he was, and he fell into the rose bush and got stuck in the rose bush because every time he tried to move, the thorns were getting him. It was brutal. So never play catch or any kind of throwing game too close to rose bushes. Random story for you. So again, I'm going to give you a little panoramic view here. You have the park. You can see some groups of people. Notice I'm keeping my distance. You can see the mission and the mission church, mission cemetery. And then you can see kind of those natural trails where I just came from the old ruins. So that is our tour of the mission. Again, I wish I could take you inside. I wish I could show you more, tell you more about it. But I hope you enjoyed my adventure, and I will talk to you again soon. Bye.